The Zyrek Dominion had conquered 100 worlds, crushing resistance with brute force and precision. When they set their sights on Earth, they saw nothing but another weak species to dominate. Commander Kryvax stood aboard the bridge of his warship, arms crossed as he watched the transmission from the latest scouting fleet. The images were underwhelming. Bipedal creatures, fragile-looking, with no natural armor or visible energy manipulation. Their military forces relied on crude kinetic weaponry, lacking the elegance of directed plasma or molecular disintegration. Pathetic, one of his officers scoffed. Kryvax nodded in agreement. We have fought true warriors before. This species is not one of them. The fleet moved in without warning, appearing over Earth's major population centers. Human defenses reacted faster than expected, launching ground-based missiles and scrambling aerial craft, but the Zyrek were undeterred. They had faced planetary resistance before. A single decisive strike was enough to break most species. Within hours, the Zyrek captured a small military outpost, rounding up the humans stationed there. Kryvax personally supervised the transfer of prisoners to the command ship. He studied them with curiosity, noting the lack of fear in their expressions. Most species trembled when faced with Zyrek soldiers. Humans, however, stared back, their gazes sharp, calculating. One in particular caught his attention. Step forward, Kryvax ordered. A man emerged from the line, his uniform tattered but his posture unbroken. His face bore bruises from the initial scuffle, yet he stood as if the wounds were nothing. Name, Kryvax demanded. The human smirked. Callum Graves. Cal, if we're getting friendly. His tone was defiant, almost amused. That was unusual. The Zyrek had crushed stronger species, reducing entire civilizations to rubble, yet this man acted as if none of it mattered. Kryvax's mandibles clicked in irritation. You are a prisoner of the Zyrek Dominion. You will answer our questions, or you will suffer. Cal shrugged. You invaded our planet. Shouldn't I be the one asking questions? Kryvax signaled to his guards, and one of them struck the human across the face. Cal barely reacted, his head snapping back before returning to its original position, a fresh cut on his lip. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head like an annoyed predator rather than a beaten prisoner. Let's get this over with, Cal said, spitting blood onto the pristine floor. The interrogation chamber was sterile, illuminated by a cold blue glow. Kryvax observed from behind a reinforced barrier as his specialists worked. Zyrek interrogation methods were designed for efficiency, breaking down a prisoner's mind through a combination of neural stimulation and psychological pressure. Most subjects cracked within minutes. Cal sat strapped into the chair, electrodes attached to his temples. The lead interrogator, a Zyrek scientist, activated the neuroprobe. Kryvax expected screaming. Instead, Cal grinned. That all you got? He muttered. The interrogator increased the intensity. The screen monitoring human brain activity showed fluctuations, rapid spikes and dips that didn't align with standard response patterns. He should have been writhing in pain. Instead, he was breathing slowly, measured, his hands gripping the armrests, but otherwise showing no signs of distress. The interrogator hesitated, checking the readings. Something is wrong. His neuroresistance is abnormal. Kryvax frowned. Explain. The scientist hesitated. Human neurology is adaptive. He is resisting. Kryvax leaned in, studying Cal's face. His eyes remained locked on the interrogator, unwavering. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery. Then Cal chuckled. You're confused, aren't you? His voice was calm, almost mocking. You expected us to break. The Zyrek interrogator adjusted the controls, increasing the signal again. This time, Cal grimaced, his breathing shallow for a moment. But instead of collapsing into submission, he began to talk. Pain is temporary. You think you're the first to try this on us? His voice was hoarse but steady. We've been through worse. We do it to ourselves just to see how far we can go. Kryvax didn't understand. No species resisted this level of interrogation. The Zyrek had perfected their methods over centuries. Pain tolerance varied among species, but it always followed a pattern, except now. Cal exhaled, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? He leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. You came to Earth thinking we were prey. He grinned, blood still dripping from his lip. You have no idea what you just started. A commotion outside the chamber interrupted the session. The ship's security alarms blared, red warning lights flashing along the walls. Kryvax turned sharply toward the control panel, pulling up external feeds. Something was happening. Zyrek guards rushed through the corridors, weapons drawn, their usual discipline replaced by hurried, erratic movements. Kryvax switched channels, searching for the source of the disturbance. Then he saw it. Bodies. Zyrek soldiers, slumped against walls, throats slit, wounds precise. The security footage showed dark figures moving through the hallways, too fast to track, their forms blending into the shadows. No energy weapons. No plasma discharges. Just cold, silent efficiency. A transmission came through, a panicked voice. Commander, we are under attack. Unknown hostiles inside the ship. The message cut off abruptly. Kryvax turned back to Cal. The human was smiling. Yeah, Cal said, stretching his shoulders against the restraints. We don't leave our own behind. Kryvax finally understood. This wasn't a species that needed natural armor. They didn't rely on energy manipulation or advanced biological enhancements. They didn't fight wars like the Zyrek or any other galactic civilization. They fought like predators. The interrogation chamber lay in eerie silence. Cal remained strapped to the chair, his breath steady despite the neuroprobes still attached to his temples. The Zyrek scientist monitoring the process hesitated, glancing at the readings again. The numbers made no sense. His pain receptors should have been overwhelmed, his mind fractured under the pressure. Instead, the human sat there, barely reacting. Kryvax paced behind the reinforced barrier, mandibles clicking in irritation. No species had ever resisted this process, let alone mocked it. He had seen warriors crumble, leaders break, entire civilizations kneel. But this human, he didn't just endure, he defied. Again, Kryvax ordered. The interrogator hesitated before increasing the neural intensity. The machine hummed, amplifying the energy coursing through Cal's mind. His jaw tightened, his fingers flexed against the restraints, but still, he did not scream. His body shuddered for a brief moment before settling. Then, to their shock, he laughed. That all you got? His voice was hoarse, but the amusement remained. The Zyrek scientist's fingers hovered over the controls. Commander, this resistance, it's not natural. His mind is adapting. Kryvax stepped closer, staring at the human. Explain. The scientist gestured to the monitor. Most species experience an immediate threshold of pain before their neural pathways overload. Humans don't follow that pattern. Instead of breaking, their nervous system adjusts. It's as if their biology is learning how to withstand it. Kryvax narrowed his eyes. That's impossible. Cal smirked, tilting his head. Not for us. The doors hissed open as a Zyrek officer rushed in, his posture tense. Commander, we have a problem. Kryvax turned sharply. What now? The officer hesitated before speaking. The ship's outer patrols are missing. A cold silence settled in the room. Kryvax's mandibles twitched. Define missing? The officer shifted uncomfortably. There were 15 stationed along the perimeter. None have reported back. Their trackers are offline. Kryvax's mind raced. No ships had docked. No alarms had sounded. The Zyrek were meticulous in security, their systems designed to detect even the smallest anomalies. There was no way an enemy force could have breached undetected. Unless they were already inside. He turned back to Cal. The human had closed his eyes, breathing slowly, his expression calm, too calm. Kryvax stepped forward, his voice low. What did you do? Cal opened one eye, smirking. Me? I've been right here the whole time. A transmission interrupted them, a sharp static-laced voice over the command channel. Security teams to Deck 4. We have movement. Unknown contacts. Kryvax's jaw clenched. The Zyrex ships were fortified, with only 2 ways in or out, either through the main docking bay or the emergency airlocks, both of which were heavily guarded. The idea that something, or someone, had infiltrated without triggering defenses was unthinkable. Put it on screen, Kryvax ordered. The display flickered, showing grainy security footage of Deck 4. At first, the corridor appeared empty, the only movement coming from the emergency lighting flickering overhead. Then, without warning, a Zyrex guard was pulled into the shadows. No sound. No struggle. Just gone. Another figure moved along the far end of the hall, barely visible against the dim lighting. The cameras struggled to focus, capturing only glimpses, shifting silhouettes, fluid motion, unnatural silence. Kryvax felt an unfamiliar sensation crawl through his exoskeleton. Something close to unease. Enhance, he barked. The screen zoomed in, capturing a faint reflection as one of the figures passed beneath the emergency light. A human. Dressed in dark, lightweight armor, moving with eerie precision. His weapon was not the bulky, energy-based kind used by most species. It was small, compact, but devastatingly efficient. The Zyrex scientist inhaled sharply. Commander, they're inside. A scream cut through the transmission as another Zyrex soldier vanished from view. The video feed scrambled for a moment before stabilizing again. More movement, silent figures darting from shadow to shadow, striking without hesitation. Kryvax turned toward Cal, fury rising. How? The human simply smiled. You're not the only ones who know how to infiltrate a ship. Another transmission came through, this time from a higher-ranking officer. His voice was strained, breathing heavy. Commander, we are under attack. We don't know how many. There. A wet gurgling noise interrupted him, followed by static. Kryvax spun back to the screen, watching as a group of Zyrex soldiers formed a defensive perimeter. Their weapons were raised, scanning the corridor for movement. The air was thick with tension. Then, the lights cut out completely. A moment passed. 2. 3. Gunfire erupted. The Zyrex soldiers fired blindly, their plasma rounds illuminating the corridor in brief flashes of energy. Shadows flickered, movement barely visible between the bursts of light. Then, one by one, the Zyrex fell. Not from energy blasts. Not from explosions. But from something far worse. Silent, close-range kills. A knife to the throat. A precise shot to the base of the skull. Bodies hit the floor with soft thuds, their weapons clattering uselessly beside them. The last soldier stood frozen, his mandibles twitching as he tried to comprehend what he was witnessing. Then a hand shot out from the darkness, dragging him away. The transmission cut to black. The Zyrex scientist backed away from the console, shaking his head. This isn't war. This is slaughter. Kryvax clenched his fists. Activate the internal lockdown. Flood the corridors with nerve gas. The officer hesitated. Commander, our own forces. Do it! Alarms blared as the ship's emergency systems engaged. A hissing sound filled the vents as a deadly toxin flooded the lower decks. Any organic life form caught in the gas would suffocate within minutes. It was a desperate measure, but necessary. The scientist checked the monitors again. Still no signs of distress from the infiltrators. They're wearing sealed gear. Kryvax's temper flared. Then cut off their oxygen. Shut down all life support. The officer's fingers raced over the console. The air filtration system shut down, temperature controls ceased, and pressure levels adjusted to suffocating lows. Any normal species would falter. Most would collapse within minutes. Yet the humans kept moving. Kryvax watched as another group of infiltrators emerged on a different deck, unaffected. Their movements remained fluid, precise, unbothered by the rapidly deteriorating environment. They weren't just surviving, they were adapting. He turned back to Cal, who was now leaning as far forward as the restraints allowed, eyes locked onto him with something that made the Zyrex commander's exoskeleton tighten: amusement. You don't get it, do you? Cal's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the tension in the room. We don't fight like you. We don't rely on tech to do the work for us. We've been killing each other for centuries. War isn't strategy to us, it's instinct. The ship trembled as an explosion rocked the lower decks. The lights flickered, warning sirens screaming through the halls. A final transmission crackled over the speakers, the voice of a Zyrek soldier filled with raw terror. They aren't soldiers, he gasped. They're hunters. Cal's smirk widened. And you just made yourselves the prey. The command center was in chaos. Zyrek officers scrambled between consoles, their movements frantic as reports flooded in from every deck. Security feeds flickered with distorted images of their own forces being torn apart in near silence. The infiltrators moved like ghosts, striking without hesitation before vanishing into the darkness. Kryvax's mandibles tightened. The nerve gas had failed. The oxygen cutoff had no effect. His soldiers were dying, and he still had no clear picture of how many enemies were on board. A transmission crackled through the speakers. The voice of a Zyrek squad leader was laced with panic. We've lost control of the lower decks. They're pushing upward. We can't. A brief burst of gunfire followed by a wet gurgle cut the message short. Silence. Then static. Kryvax slammed a fist against the nearest console. How many are there? He demanded. The surveillance officer's fingers danced over the controls, trying to isolate heat signatures. Unknown. Our scanners can't track them properly. They're masking their presence. Low body heat, minimal energy signatures. It's as if they aren't even here. Kryvax turned back to the interrogation room. Cal was still bound, but he looked as if he were sitting comfortably in his own quarters rather than a prisoner on an enemy warship. His gaze was steady, unreadable. Kryvax stormed forward, grabbing the human's chin and forcing him to meet his eyes. How many? He hissed. Cal's lips twitched. Enough. Kryvax resisted the urge to lash out. Anger wouldn't solve this. Cold calculation would. He released Cal, stepping back. The Zyrek were one of the most advanced warrior species in the galaxy. Their technology, their tactics, their discipline, it was superior in every way. Yet these humans were dismantling them like amateurs. He turned to the nearest officer. Initiate emergency bulkhead lockdown. Seal every section of the ship except this command deck. The officer hesitated. Commander, that will trap dozens of our own soldiers with them. Kryvax's tone was ice. They are already dead. The order was executed. Throughout the ship, reinforced bulkheads slammed shut, isolating the decks below. The ship's internal scanners registered the shift. Hundreds of Zyrek troops cut off from reinforcements, left to fend for themselves against the unseen predators moving among them. Kryvax exhaled, mandibles twitching as he forced himself to think. He had fought countless wars. His victories were legendary. If humans wanted a battle, he would give them one on his terms. He gestured toward Cal. Prepare him for execution. The scientist hesitated. Commander, he may still have value. Kryvax's glare silenced him. His kind are tearing through our ship as we speak. I will not allow him the satisfaction of outliving us. Two guards stepped forward, unfastening Cal's restraints while keeping their weapons trained on him. He didn't resist. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself for something inevitable. One of the guards pressed a plasma blade against his back, forcing him to move. Then the lights cut out. A deep, suffocating darkness swallowed the command deck. Emergency lighting flickered weakly before failing altogether. The only illumination came from the dim glow of console screens, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The ship's AI stuttered. Power, failure, unknown cause. Kryvax's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't just infiltrated the ship. They had seized control. A sharp cry echoed through the chamber. One of the guards was gone. No struggle. No sound. Just gone. The remaining Zyrek soldiers raised their weapons, eyes darting wildly in the darkness. Their infrared sensors should have compensated for the lack of light, yet all they saw was black. Kryvax activated his comms. All units report. Static. Then. They're here. The voice came from behind him. But not Zyrek. Not alien. Human. Kryvax spun, plasma weapon raised, but his reflexes weren't fast enough. A hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing his wrist and twisting with inhuman precision. His weapon clattered to the floor. A figure materialized in the dim light, moving like a shadow given form. Dark gear, matte black armor, face obscured beneath a visor. The only thing visible was the gleam of a serrated combat blade reflecting the dim console glow. The Zyrek nearest to Kryvax lunged with his plasma rifle, but the human moved first. The blade sliced upward in a clean arc, severing the Zyrek's throat before he could even scream. Kryvax took an involuntary step back. More figures emerged from the darkness. Humans. There weren't dozens. There weren't even hundreds. There were 5. Only 5. Yet they had carved through an entire warship. One of the newcomers stepped forward, weapon resting casually against his shoulder. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "We've got control of the ship's main systems. Your comms are fried. Your reinforcements aren't coming. You've got one option left, Commander." Kryvax's mandibles clicked. "Surrender?" he spat. The human tilted his head. "No." He gestured toward Cal, who was now grinning. "You let him go." Kryvax's mind raced. His fleet was still out there. Even if these infiltrators had taken the ship, the moment they tried to leave, they would be incinerated by Zyrek reinforcements. The humans had made a fatal mistake coming aboard. He straightened, regaining composure. "You think I'll negotiate? You think I'll let you walk away?" The lead human chuckled. "Negotiate? No. This isn't a negotiation. This is a message." Cal finally stepped forward, rubbing his wrists where the restraints had been. "You invaded our planet thinking we were weak. Thought we'd beg. Thought we'd break." His voice was steady, razor sharp. "But we're not like you," Kryvax sneered. "No. You're worse." Cal smirked. "Correct." The ship trembled. A deep, guttural explosion echoed from somewhere below. Kryvax's eyes widened. "What have you done?" The lead human activated a small device on his wrist. The security feeds flickered back to life, displaying the lower decks of the ship. The remaining Zyrek forces were either dead or trapped behind sealed doors. Explosives were planted in key locations: engines, ammunition storage, life support. Cal crossed his arms. "Your ship belongs to us now." Kryvax's rage boiled over. "You're mad. Even if you take this vessel, my fleet will destroy you." The lead human shook his head. "That's the problem with you, Zyrek. You think in terms of fleets. Numbers. Technology." He gestured to the fallen Zyrek soldiers scattered around them. "We don't fight wars that way. We don't play fair." Cal leaned in, voice lowering. "And we never lose." Kryvax realized, too late, that he had underestimated them. The humans hadn't just won the battle. They had sent a warning. The Zyrek fleet stood ready. Hundreds of warships formed an impenetrable blockade around their captured vessel, weapons primed to vaporize at the moment it made any suspicious move. The command ship, a massive dreadnought bristling with advanced weaponry, maintained direct oversight. Grand Strategist Vorin loomed over the central tactical display, his segmented fingers tapping against the metal railing as he analyzed every detail. Kryvax's ship hadn't been destroyed. That, more than anything, disturbed him. If the humans had taken control, why hadn't they attempted to flee? Why had they not sent a distress signal or tried to bargain? It didn't add up. A junior officer approached, mandibles clicking nervously. "Grand Strategist, there has been no communication from Commander Kryvax or his crew since the power failure aboard his vessel. Our scans confirm only sporadic life signs. It is unclear who remains alive." Vorin's cold eyes never left the display. "And the human prisoners? No sign of them." But the ship's systems have been compromised. Internal scans are unreliable. Voron's mind worked swiftly. If the humans had taken the ship, then conventional tactics would not apply. They had already demonstrated an ability to operate outside predictable strategic patterns. That meant one thing: he could not assume they were still playing by the rules of traditional warfare. He turned sharply. Prepare a boarding party. 2 battalions. Full combat gear. We will retake the vessel deck by deck. The officer hesitated. Sir, the moment our forces step aboard, they will be cut off. If the humans have control of security systems, they can. I am aware of the risks. Voron's voice was clipped, final. But we do not cower from primitives. A tense silence hung over the bridge as preparations were made. Then, without warning, the captured ship moved. It was subtle at first. A slow, deliberate rotation. Not an escape attempt, not a reckless charge toward the blockade, just a repositioning. Voron's gaze narrowed. What are they doing? The tactical officer checked the data. Unknown, sir. No energy buildup detected. No weapons charging. It's as if they're adjusting their angle. Then came the transmission. A single audio feed. No encryption, no complex coding, just a direct, open broadcast to every Zyrek vessel in the fleet. The voice was unmistakably human. Calm, measured. To the Zyrek fleet, we are in control of this vessel. Stand down immediately. Voron sneered. Arrogance. He gestured to cut the transmission, but before the officer could comply, the human continued. You are under the assumption that this ship is merely a hostage, that your superior numbers will allow you to reclaim it without consequence. That is incorrect. A pause. We did not take this ship for negotiation. We took it as a demonstration. A second signal overlaid the first. This one was visual. Security footage from the captured ship played across the main display, showing the aftermath of the human assault. Zyrek bodies lined the corridors, weapons still in hand, expressions frozen in shock. The ship's engineering bay, normally a place of meticulous precision, was a war zone of shattered consoles and cut power lines. Explosive charges had been placed along key structural points. Voron's hands tightened against the railing. They've rigged the ship. The human's voice returned, steady as ever. If you attempt to board, we will detonate every charge simultaneously. Your fleet will watch as one of your own warships is reduced to atoms before your very eyes. The bridge fell into silence. Even the most hardened officers stiffened. Voron's mind raced through possibilities. If the ship was destroyed, it would be a humiliating loss, but one vessel meant little to the Zyrek war machine. The true danger lay in the message being sent. This was not a plea. It was a calculated act of psychological warfare. The human was proving a point. They could take a Zyrek ship. They could hold it. And they could obliterate it at will. Voron exhaled slowly. They won't detonate. They need the ship to escape. The human, as if hearing his thoughts, spoke again. Escape is irrelevant. This is not about survival. This is about understanding. The image on the display shifted. New footage played, Zyrek soldiers encountering human forces on the lower decks. The Zyrek fired first. Energy blasts struck armor but did not drop their targets. Then the humans moved. It was clinical, brutal. Every shot precise. Every blade strike decisive. The Zyrek, for all their numbers, were outmatched. Voron had studied countless species, dissected their combat doctrines. He had always assumed humans would rely on technology, that their military would lean on advanced warfare rather than raw, instinctual violence. But the footage showed something else entirely. They fought like they were born for it. Voron turned to his officers. How many humans took that ship? The answer came hesitantly. 5, sir. A muscle in Voron's jaw twitched. 5. 5 warriors had done this. His fleet had millions. His empire, trillions. But suddenly, for the first time, numbers felt irrelevant. The human's voice came one last time. You are not dealing with another empire, Another species bound by the same limitations as your past enemies. The feed displayed a single image now: Cal, seated in the interrogation chamber before his rescue. His face was calm, calculating. This had been planned from the beginning. We are not conquerors. We are not invaders. A pause. But if you make us your enemy. The footage cut to a final clip. A human squad clearing a Zyrek outpost, moving with terrifying efficiency. Then we will be your extinction. The transmission ended. The bridge remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Voron's eyes remained fixed on the blank display. He knew the truth now. This wasn't about a single battle. It wasn't about one captured ship. The humans had never needed an army. They had never needed fleets. Because war was not just something they fought. It was something they were. Voron remained motionless, his gaze locked on the darkened display. The transmission had ended, but its weight lingered in the air like a physical presence. No one on the bridge spoke. No one dared to. They all understood what had just happened. The Zyrek were the dominant force in the known galaxy. They had crushed empires, shattered civilizations, rewritten history in their own image. No species had ever stood against them and survived for long. Yet here, in the span of a single battle, humanity had forced them to question everything they knew about war. The junior officer broke the silence. Orders, Grand Strategist? His voice was unsteady, a stark contrast to the usual unwavering discipline of the Zyrek military. Voron's fingers tightened against the railing. His mind churned through possibilities, but none led to victory. He could order the immediate destruction of the captured ship, erase the humans and their threat in a single, overwhelming assault. But doing so would accomplish nothing. It would not undo what had already been done. It would not erase the footage burned into the minds of every Zyrek officer. It would not change the fact that 5 humans had just dismantled an entire warship, outmaneuvered a fleet, and dictated the terms of engagement with absolute confidence. Voron's mandibles clicked softly, a rare sign of unease. "Stand down the boarding parties," he ordered. "Hold position." Murmurs rippled through the command deck. None dared to challenge him outright, but he could sense the unease spreading among his officers. "They are bluffing," one of the senior tacticians said. "The humans will not destroy the ship. They need it to escape." Voron turned his cold gaze on the tactician. "Do they?" The officer hesitated. No answer came. The truth was clear. Humanity had already demonstrated an ability to operate outside conventional strategy. They had taken a warship with only 5 operatives, evaded detection, and executed a flawless infiltration. Would they really hesitate to destroy the ship if it suited their message? Voron wasn't willing to gamble on that answer. Another transmission came through. This time, it was directed only to the command ship. A private line. Voron motioned for the channel to be opened. Cal's face appeared, his expression neutral. "You're hesitating." Voron's mandibles twitched slightly. "A warrior does not hesitate. He calculates." Cal nodded slightly. "Good. That means you understand the position you're in." Voron's voice remained calm, controlled. "You cannot win this war, human. Even if you take this vessel, even if you escape, your people cannot stand against the full might of the Zyrek Dominion." Cal leaned forward slightly. "That depends on how you define winning." Voron's eyes narrowed. Cal continued. "If you think winning means wiping us out, then sure, maybe you could. Maybe you could send fleets, burn planets, throw everything you have at us. But that's not how humans fight." He tilted his head slightly. "You still don't understand what we are, do you?" Voron's silence was answer enough. Cal exhaled, eyes locked onto the Grand Strategist. "We don't need to defeat you. We just need to make sure you never want to fight us again." A cold sensation settled in Voron's chest. This was not bravado. It was not arrogance. It was something far worse. Certainty. Cal gestured toward the unseen depths of the ship. 5 of us took this vessel. 5. What do you think happens when you give an entire species a reason to come after you? The question lingered. Voron had no answer. For the first time in his long career, he was facing something he could not predict, could not counter. He had studied every species in the galaxy, memorized their strategies, broken their wills through superior tactics and overwhelming force. But humanity was different. Voron's voice, when it finally came, was measured. "What do you want?" Cal smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Simple. We walk away. You let us leave, and in return, you get to pretend this never happened." Voron considered the words carefully. Letting them go meant admitting, even if only in silence, that the Zyrek had been outplayed. It meant acknowledging that an empire built on fear had just encountered something it could not intimidate. But the alternative was worse. If he ordered an attack, the humans would detonate the ship. The Zyrek fleet would watch as one of their own vessels was annihilated from within, not by an enemy fleet, but by 5 operatives who had already proven they were beyond conventional tactics. And then? The war would begin. And Voron now understood something chilling. The humans wanted that war far less than the Zyrek did. Not because they feared it, but because they knew exactly what they would have to become to win it. Voron exhaled slowly. His decision was made. "You will release control of the ship's systems once you reach neutral space." Cal gave a small nod. "There." The transmission ended. Voron turned to his officers. "Allow them to leave." Shock rippled through the bridge. "Grand strategist." Voron silenced the protest with a single, razor-sharp glance. The captured ship moved. Slowly at first, then accelerating as it slipped through the blockade unchallenged. No Zyrek vessel opened fire. No pursuit was ordered. Voron watched in silence as it vanished into the void. A single human team had just humbled an empire. He had no doubt their species would never speak of this event again. They would not boast, would not threaten, would not demand recognition. That wasn't their way. Because humans did not wage war for the sake of pride. They waged war to end it. And if the Zyrek ever forced them into that war, there would be no empire left to tell the tale.